Hey, filmmaking motherfuckers. This is the top 10 cameras of the digital age. Are you ready? Let's do this. Back in 1999, I was 16 years old, and like every other teenage boy, I was obsessed with the movie The Matrix. In particular, the stitching together of photo film stills, known at the time as bullet time. Whoa. This technique piqued my interest in camera technology and production methods. The buzz at the time was that Star Wars Episode I: Phantom Menace was to be shot completely on digital video, which was the first major motion picture to go all in with digital technology. I didn't quite know what that meant at the time. I imagined a movie that was just made of chunky pixel blocks, like a slightly better than 8-bit video game combined with Windows 95 paint program. So I started doing some research, which at the time meant searching poorly designed Web 1.0 sites and watching DVD extras. This sent me down the path that I'm on today, keeping a finger on the pulse of digital imaging technology over the last 20 years, which has happened to nearly overlap exactly with the rise of the digital image, and in particular, the dawn of the commercially viable digital cinema camera, all the way through to today's 8K, high dynamic range, full frame peak predator. Over the last 10 years at Magnanimous, we've seen the age of the digital image take great leaps and bounds forwards. So let's take a look back at the game-changing technology through the lenses of the cameras that played the biggest role. The role of the hero, the role of the go-to workhorse, and the ones that made the biggest impact on the cameras that we use today. In our camera technology timeline, I am marking the beginning of the modern digital camera age, with cameras like the Sony PD-150, the Canon XL1, and of course, the Panasonic DVX100. 3 CCD cameras shooting standard def to mini DV tapes. These cameras were the trusty steeds for owner-operators in the late 90s and the early 2000s. My focus will be on the owner-operator. The Sony F900, aka the Panavision HD 900F, was an incredibly influential camera in the very beginning of digital cinematography, but was also incredibly expensive and was not feasible for every owner-operator. By most influential, I mean the cameras that have shaped our understanding of what a digital video camera is and what it can be, and have inspired huge shifts in the evolution of camera technology. Today we're excited about the Sony FX9, the Canon C500 Mark II, C300 Mark III, and Red launching the Komodo. Here is my list from 10 to 1 of the forefathers of these cameras and of our current digital video technology. Number 10, the Sony FS700. Release date, November 2012. Primary virtue, affordable, high frame rates. When the Sony FS700 was released in 2011, an important camera in its own right, it introduced the Super 35mm CMOS Exmor HD sensor. It was a real competitor to the Panasonic AF100. With the introduction of the Sony FS700, slow motion at frame rates of 120, 240, 480, and 960 per second became available to all professionals at a reasonable price point. The FS700 captures 120 frames per second and 240 frames per second at full 1080 resolution. As you increase the frame rates into the more extreme frame rates, you begin to sacrifice resolution. Shooting at 480 frames per second reduces the resolution down to 720 by 480. And shooting at 960 frames per second reduces it all the way down to 480 standard definition. Furthermore, recording was restricted to bursts of 16 seconds at 120 frames per second and bursts of 8 seconds at 240 frames per second, but with a variety of useful trigger options. This camera undoubtedly provided access to high frame rate recording to a whole new generation of shooters. Music videos, product shots, training videos, even scientific applications, and beyond. And it was a hell of a lot of fun. Number 9, the Canon EOS C300. Release date, November 2011. Primary virtue, native EF mount, digital cinema camera. The hype surrounding this camera launch was immense. In 2011, we were in the full bloom of the video DSLR shooter revolution, and the Canon C300 was the beginning of what would be an epic parlay by Canon. They masterfully leveraged the success of their video DSLRs into a full line of digital cinema cameras. Before the mid-2000s, Canon had a reputation for building superb glass and terrible video cameras. There are over 90 million L lenses in the world, a massive advantage for a company looking to make gains in the digital video camera market. They shook their bad reputation with the launch of the Canon C300. It is a Super 35 CMOS sensor. The C300 was the first proper digital cinema camera that you could natively mount an EF lens to. Before the launch of the C series line of cameras, you could mount an L lens to a video DSLR, but then you had to figure out an audio workaround and an ND solution, as well as a proper shoulder configuration. It was a whole lot of work to shoot in a traditional ENG or cinema style. With the launch of the C300, you had a solution to most of those problems, and you could achieve the shallow depth of field look that was all the rage in 2011. The Canon C300 quickly became the industry standard for HD video capture and is still used widely today. And it's one of 2 cameras on this list that we still carry. Number 8, the Red Scarlet-X. Release date, November 2011. Primary virtue, affordable entry-level RED camera. The Red Scarlet and the C300 launched at the same time. The hype at that time was unbelievable. I recall that the night that the Red Scarlet-X became available for pre-order, Red.com crashed with the rush of traffic looking to see what the specs were, but more importantly, everyone wanted to know the price point. The Red Scarlet-X represented a huge shift in the digital cinema camera market. Red has always been at the forefront of pushing digital cinema technology forward. With the Scarlet, they launched a camera that had an entry point less than $20,000. This was huge at the time. This opened up 4K shooting to a wide range of owner-operators, a sector of the industry that was quickly growing at the time. It was the perfect camera for the moment, and everybody wanted to get on board. The Scarlet featured the Mysterium X5K sensor and launched the DSMC camera line and set the standard for the modular, customizable configurations that are widely available from every major camera brand today. Red also leveraged the success of this camera with their upgrade paths to Epic X, eventually the Dragon, and the current DSMC2 line of cameras. The Scarlet also offered 120 frames per second, albeit at reduced resolution. It was also tons of fun. Number 7, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera. Release date, April 2012. Primary virtue, inexpensive raw video. The spring of 2012 was exciting. Back when NAB was still a launching place for new products, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera won the show. This camera brought the ability to shoot RAW that the Red Digital Cinema had made popular, but at an incredibly low price point, $2,995. In a move that would become the Blackmagic design signature, they announced the product at NAB, made it available for pre-order with an expected ship date in July, but did not ship it until January of 2013. Another common Blackmagic practice is beta testing their product on the public. This is common to some extent with every major modern camera company, but Blackmagic has been especially egregious. At the time, they did not have the research and development departments of their larger competitors. So, when the Blackmagic Cinema camera hit the market, it was wrought with issues that no other camera experiences. Hot pixels, stuck pixels, power issues that lead to bricked cameras, and pretty large design flaws, including a touchscreen that is your only camera preview monitor, quarter-inch audio inputs, and a built-in battery. The camera utilized a modified micro four thirds sensor with a massive crop factor of 2.5 to 1, and its low light performance was non-existent. However, for all its flaws, the Blackmagic Cinema camera did something that no other camera did at the time. It shot RAW, truly uncompressed RAW video at 2.5K resolution. It also set a new standard for packing a big punch into a small form factor. The BMCC set a new floor for the market and put downward pressure on its competitors to offer similar features at a competitive price. Red code was the industry standard for compressed RAW. Between them and Blackmagic, the pressure for the big three, Canon, Sony, and Panasonic, to introduce similar features was on, and the clock was ticking to go to market with a rival product. Hyping a product launch, followed by a significant delay in going to market with a buggy product, is still a Blackmagic staple to this day. I don't like Blackmagic, let the record show. Number 6, the Sony EX1. Release date, November 2008. Primary virtue, versatile HD camera. I love this camera. It was the best camera of the pre-DSLR era. And with the re-release of the EX1R, the body design was nearly flawless, super functional, and the only Sony camera I've ever used with a simple menu system and hardware configuration. With a 1/2-inch true HD sensor, it produces a great image and a super easy to use interval recording and high frame rate shooting up to 60 frames per second. The Sony S/S cards were the only downside, but with the addition of an SD card adapter some years later, it made this camera a go-to for many years. The Sony EX1R was the logical conclusion of cameras like the Sony PD-150, Canon XL1, and Panasonic DVX100. The video DSLR disruption made the Sony EX1R a less desirable camera to the masses, but it still has a devoted user base to this day. And of all the cameras on this list, it's one of 2 that we still carry in our inventory as of the recording of this video. Number 5, the Panasonic AF100. Release date, December 2010. Primary virtue, mounting photo and cinema glass to a video camera. Before the Panasonic AF100, if you wanted to use a photo style lens on a proper video camera, you had to use a Letus Extreme 35mm adapter. It's a monstrosity, and people used to actually use it to shoot. The Panasonic AF100 was launched at the perfect time. It was first to market after the video DSLR craze. They rode that wave by adding a Micro Four Thirds mount to a real video camera, and therefore bringing the shallow depth of field look to a real video camera body with XLR ports and ND filters. The Micro Four Thirds mount was also easily adapted to a wide variety of lenses, including PL and EF mount. By adding a PL mount adapter to this rig, it allowed you to build it out in a full cinema shooting style, which brought that level of shooting performance to a price point that had not been previously seen before. This camera is often forgotten as we look back on the history of digital video cameras. But it was the success of the AF100 that helped us to build our rental business in the early 2010s. And the camera was a mainstay in the middle market for many years. It also rendered a pretty great image. Number 4, the Panasonic HVX200. Release date, December 2005. Primary virtue, solid state digital media. I recall the days when you could go to the corner Walgreens and purchase mini DV tapes for your next shoot. Before the Panasonic HVX200, shooting to digital solid state media was not readily available to the masses. For the first time, you could shoot to a card, and for that matter, in high definition. P2 cards were the predecessor to all the digital media that we use today. SD, CF, CFast, and beyond. This camera was the Plymouth Rock of our rental operations. HVX200s, and for that matter, P2 cards, were constantly working. The image was good for a prosumer camera of the day. The menu was simple, the ergonomics were okay, but they were the first to market, and the days of digitizing your tapes were over, and the world of dragging and dropping files was upon us. The AG HVX200 could still shoot to tapes, so it was the perfect camera to transition from the old process to the new process. When first launched, finding a card reader was a real adventure, but Panasonic eventually came out with a USB card reader. The HPX170 was released shortly after, which essentially was the same camera but without a tape deck. I'll be the first one to say that the HVX200 is not the sexiest camera on this list, but it's definitely one of the most influential. It was ubiquitous on most video production sets for about 8 years, which is a long run in the digital age. And it primed the owner-operator market for a high level of performance at an affordable price point. Number 3, the Arri Alexa. Release date, April 2010. Primary virtue, Airflex digital cinema camera. You can't make a list about digital cameras without putting an Arri Alexa on it. I will admit that its original price point does put it a bit out of the range for most owner-operators, but the influence it has had on all modern cameras, as well as the second and third-hand buyers of Arri Alexa, will attest to its high level of performance 10 years after its initial release. Before the Alexa, Arri specialized in and was the industry standard in film cameras. Their first attempt at a digital cinema camera set a new bar for what a digital cinema camera could be. Built to maintain the beautiful filmic look that was coveted by cinematographers for over 100 years. It's renowned for its beautiful highlight roll-off and latitude, which was also previously only possible with film. Also, it's an absolute tank, which makes it super durable. Even the Deke proclaimed that film was dead after using the Arri Alexa, and I quote, "This camera has brought us to a point where digital is simply better." Need I say more? Number 2, Red 1. Release date, August 2007. Primary virtue, 4K digital cinema camera. In the arms race that is the digital cinema camera market, the Red 1 was undoubtedly the atomic bomb that not only rocked the camera market, but shaped what it would become for the foreseeable future. In what is now legend, Red in 2006 at NAB unveiled a shiny aluminum prototype. It took $1,000 deposits for the Red 1, a 4K digital cinema camera. This sent a shockwave through the film and video production world. That not only was a digital camera coming to market, but one that would be within the reach of the owner-operator. This caused a systemic shift in the digital cinema camera world that we still feel to this day. Red Digital Cinema's first production camera captured up to 120 frames per second at 2K resolution and 60 frames per second at 4K resolution. Its Mysterium sensor utilized the proprietary RAW format called Red Code, which further revolutionized digital imaging, giving cinematographers access to raw sensor images. By 2010, Red had forced the hand of all the major manufacturers, which were playing catch up. Canon, Sony, Panasonic all have products that compete with Red on a similar level today. Red created a market in which a company like Blackmagic Design could exist. Without the launch of Red 1, the shift towards affordable digital cinema cameras would not have happened, at least not in the way that it did. It would have likely happened eventually, but it was Red that pushed the technology forward and put pressure on the big dogs to play ball at an affordable price point. Number 1, Canon 5D Mark II. Release date, November 2008. Primary virtue, inexpensive, shallow depth of field, HD video. As you may have guessed, the Canon 5D Mark II sits at the top of this list, the most influential camera of the digital age. Before the Canon 5D Mark II, filmmakers, cinematographers, image makers that wanted to achieve a shallow depth of field film look had to shoot on a film camera or use a monstrosity of a lens adapter solution. The 5D Mark II achieved this look with relatively good low light performance for the time at an amazingly low price point. So the story goes that Vincent Laforet got his hands on the Canon 5D Mark II prototype and was astounded at what Canon had created. Canon added a video function to their DSLR for what they thought would be a useful tool for photojournalists that needed to shoot video on the fly. What Mr. Laforet quickly discovered is that the Canon 5D Mark II allowed you to pick up the camera and start shooting with a filmic look right out of the box, with all of your photo gear and photo lenses wide open, which allowed a new generation of cinematographers to manipulate the depth of field, like decades of filmmakers that had came before them. The Canon 5D Mark II quickly became a part of everyone's production package and rocked the photo video world, leading to a masterful parlay by Canon with a decade of a successful line of digital cinema cameras that are still an industry standard to this day. Not only did the Canon 5D start the push for the market to develop new cameras that created a cinematic look, it also started the race for better low-light performance and eventually better dynamic range performance that we reap the benefits of today, whether it's in your favorite go-to production camera or the camera that's in your pocket and a part of your phone. So that was our list of the most influential cameras of the digital age. Did we leave off your favorite camera? Leave a comment and tell us what your favorite camera of the last 20 years is. Subscribe and click the bell to get notifications about all of our new videos, or visit magrents.com to see our full inventory of rental items. And watch our helpful gear videos. Remember to keep your creative fire alive and always pursue your passion. Until next time, filmmaking friends.